thanks so much. It's great to be here, and I know how hard it is as a fellow parent to just get out the door, especially on a school night, so congratulations. You made it out the door, you're here, you're with one another, and looking around this room, I want everyone to take a moment and just look around and think, these are people I can talk about these issues with, even if you don't know one another. You may be here with someone you know very well, but these are some people, some friends and neighbors and community members that you can talk with, because I think one of the things that we sometimes forget to do, and especially when our kids get a little older, like late elementary and middle school, and we're not sitting there on the playground with them all the time, is we forget that we can actually talk with other people in our community and get ideas for, you know, hey, how's it going? Are you thinking about getting your kiddo a cell phone, or is your kid playing this game? How's that going for you? Anything I should know about, right? And truly, you are, to one another, a very important resource. Parents need to be talking with one another about this stuff. So, how many of you feel a little bit envious of your kids who are growing up in the digital age, playing, you know, arguably much better video games than we got to play, having access to global community through YouTube, having access to personalized learning? How many of you feel like, I'm kind of envious, this is pretty awesome? Okay. How many of you feel a little concerned, like they have access to YouTube and global community and that's a little bit much? Like, whoa, baby. Okay. Whoa, baby. Okay. Now, I saw a few people, both, your hands went up for both, and that's kind of the camp that I'm in. I'm both envious of my kiddo and the experiences that he's going to have and the amazing, amazing ability that he has to create and share content at such a young age. He was making videos before he could read. That's amazing. He was making books with videos on each page before he could read that were like his Legos telling stories. That is an incredible thing to be able to do as a 4.5 or 5-year-old, right? But I also get nervous when I think about him having a digital footprint, having a reputation that goes beyond our family and our block and our little community, right? And most of us didn't grow up with that. Most of us didn't grow up with access to the information that our kids have. If we heard about something that our parents were speaking about, maybe in hushed tones, we'd have to be really intrepid and go to the library and look that up, right? If we said, I want to know more about that, and they said, that's not for kids, our kids can Google it. Right? Our kids can Google a lot of things, and that should be somewhat concerning to all of us. We should be thinking about, gosh, do we want them Googling it? What's our plan for when they do Google it? How are we going to talk about this? Right? So these are some of the issues with kids growing up today in the digital age. And one of the things that I've done in the last 5 years since I've been working with raising digital natives and creating this conversation, cultivating this conversation, is just talking with kids. Talking with kids about what's it like growing up in the digital age. You know, what do you love about it? And there's a lot that they love. When I ask kids, what do they love about growing up in the digital age, they'll say, well, you never have to be bored. You can play really cool games. You can talk with your friends and your family members all over the world. You know, many of them have had experiences of Skyping or doing Google Hangouts, even internationally or across the country. They get how amazing that is, right? How incredible that is. But I ask them too, what stresses you out? And they've got a lot to say about that too. They'll say, well, sometimes my parents are so busy on their device that it's hard to talk to them because I'm looking at the top of their head. Or sometimes if they're older and their friends have devices, they'll say, well, sometimes I try to hang out with my friends and they're so, you know, wrapped up in their device they can't really talk. Or they'll talk about how sometimes they get distracted. They're trying to do their work or trying to focus, and they get distracted. They have multiple tabs open or they're double screening. So they've acknowledged to me some of the downsides of growing up in the digital age. And I want to share with you both some of those exciting opportunities and think about ways that we as parents and mentors to our kids can support our kids in accessing some of the best things that the digital age has to offer. And I also want to think with you all about ways we can mitigate and decrease some of the stresses and the challenges, and also just live with them, right? Some of them aren't going away, but we can live with them, and how can we do that? So these are the things I want to share with you tonight, and then I will also take questions at the end, and I'll also be happy to chat with folks while I sign books, and you don't have to get a book to talk with me. I just want to hear about your experiences, because this is how I learn, truly, is by talking with parents like you. I learn and get ideas about how this is happening, right? What's your experience? What are the things that are going on in your house? What are the things that you've learned from your parenting? So that's one of my big messages that I hope you walk away with tonight is your kids have tech savvy, but you have wisdom, right? Your kids have tech savvy, but you have wisdom. Now, you may have tech savvy too. I may have some people here who work in IT. You might be a tech coordinator for the school district you work at. You may be very tech savvy as well. But the kids have, I would argue, a different way of using technology that even for those of us who, as adults, might be building our own websites or programming all day long, we still don't use tech the way kids do. You may text, but you are not group texting the entire 6th grade, for example, right? So this is a difference. Kids think that group texting 40 people is cool. Most of us would rather do something else. The way kids play games is also different than the way we play games. Some of us may be gamers, but we still use games differently than kids do. But you have wisdom. You have the wisdom of lived experience. You have wisdom about navigating conflict, navigating reputation, navigating some of the challenges that our kids face. So remember that when the next time your kid is talking to you about tech and trying to act like they know everything, remember that you have wisdom. So this is Screenwise, and in the time I was writing Screenwise, I talked to a lot of kids, and they were very open with me about their challenges. Again, about those experiences where they're trying to connect with friends and they're seeing the top of their heads, and also about their anxieties. When kids get devices, it can be stressful for them. It can be positive and great, and a lot of them are probably like champing at the bit and fighting with you and saying, I want my own this, or I want my own that, I want a wearable, I want a phone, I want the Xbox. But some of these devices also come with what I call connectivity stress. A kid gets a device and suddenly feels like, oh no, if I can't be responsive to my friends because I'm sleeping, I'm a bad friend, or because I'm eating dinner or doing my homework. So what do? We need to help them. We need to help them with that. So these are some of the things that kids shared with me while I was working on the book. So some of the core areas that we need to help kids manage in the digital age are relationships, reputation, and time management, right? Those are just a few, but they're big areas, right? So just thinking about how are we navigating relationships? How are they navigating their friendships? So we say relationships, I'm not just talking about your high school kid who may be dating, I'm talking about any relationships, your child's relationship with his or her teacher, that may be navigated digitally through a learning management system, or maybe emails are going back and forth. I'm talking about their relationship with you. The second you give your kid a device to text on, you're going to be texting your child, right? So how are they navigating that relationship? Anyone in the room ever had an interesting sort of text fight with a kid, right? Okay, so we've been there, right? And many of us have had some kind of text arguments with a spouse or someone else we're close to. So we kind of know, like, sometimes texting can go off the rails, even in a close, loving relationship, right? So relationships, huge. Our kids are navigating a lot of their relationships, including their friends that they know face-to-face, also in a digital space. So again, not just our big kids. Our little kids are playing Minecraft with their friends and other online immersive games. Our kids are sharing Google Docs at school and learning to collaborate, and sometimes that's not always pretty. Right? Reputation is another issue. How many of you feel a little bit freaked out that your child has a digital footprint? Okay. How many of you have shared pictures of your child on social media? Okay, so we are actually the people who probably created the beginnings of our child's digital footprint. So we need to take that responsibility seriously, and we need to think carefully about how we are part of creating their digital footprint and start to talk to them about that. So digital footprint, I would argue, is not something to be scared of, it's something to be aware of. It's something to be thoughtful about. But it is a big difference. Most of us, unless we have a child celebrity somewhere in this room, did not grow up with as many pictures and as many people in the sort of public world knowing about us as even our kids, right? Like I've been in situations where someone recognized my child who might not have known what he looked like, but they saw my posts on Facebook. And that is a different world. We did not grow up with that. So that's something to think about. And then time management, right? Or balance, you could call it. There's a good survey that just came out, cyber balance. But thinking about how much time are we going to spend plugged in every day? How are we going to navigate how we spend that time as well? Because there are very different ways. The whole idea of screen time, which we kind of maybe our pediatricians and other people talk to us about screen time at some point, and people kind of lump that together, and now kids are using tech in school, and parents are saying, hey, what about the screen time, right? Well, what does that look like? What are we actually doing with the technology? What are we doing with our devices? So I'm going to talk about that as well. So really, truly, it's a misconception for parents to say, I just don't get this, right? You do get it. There's a lot about your kid's digital life that you get. Connectivity stress. Can anyone relate to that? Does anyone have connectivity stress? You feel like you get out of a meeting, you have 90 emails. You know what your kid is experiencing when they say they have connectivity stress. And the thing is, you don't have to know everything to help your child. You do not need a PhD in Minecraft to understand that if your kid's a new Minecrafter and the more experienced Minecrafters don't want to let them into their particular Minecraft world, your kid's going to feel bummed out. Or if a conflict comes up in Minecraft, that it might affect day-to-day relationships or friendships, right? So you don't need to know everything to be able to know something, right? And to be there for your child. Same thing with Snapchat, for example. A lot of parents are like, oh, I don't know about this Snapchat. Well, you don't need to know everything about Snapchat to know that it's a huge bummer to see a party you weren't invited to unfolding in real time on a Saturday night while you're sitting at home, right? Because we've all had experiences of being left out, and so we can imagine how that might feel in a different setting, right? So you don't have to know everything about the apps or the games that your child plays to be able to help them navigate some of those situations. It's also a misconception to think that your kid knows it all. They may be able to make a book when they're 4, but that doesn't mean that they should just be left to their own devices. We don't want to throw these kids into the deep end. There's a lot that they need help with. And again, conflict resolution is a good example. You know more about that than they do, right? They may be growing up with group texts and you didn't, but you still know more about, for example, what to do when you've offended someone and how to try to make it right. They may be very clueless about that, and so they're going to need some mentorship and some help when that happens, and it will. So a big core idea in Screenwise, and an idea that I've been talking with to parents around the country for the last few years about, is just this idea of mentoring over monitoring, right? And it's not that monitoring doesn't have its place. It's not that you want to have no idea what your kid is doing out there. And I think it's, a newspaper in Texas wrote about me a couple of weeks ago when I was there, and it said, like, don't monitor your kids. And I thought, well, that's kind of like saying send your kids swimming without a lifeguard there. That's not really what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that if you put an app on their device to know where they've been, and then you walk away and say, okay, I'm good, my kid's fine, I put an app on their device, now I know what websites they're going to and I can read all their texts, you're not done. In fact, you've barely begun, because what's that information going to tell you outside of context, outside of mentoring, outside of showing them good ways to handle the situations that inevitably come up? Mentoring is a lot more work, though, than putting an app on their device. Mentoring is an ongoing conversation, and just like some of the other big issues that we need to talk with our kids about over the years that can be tough conversations, it's not a one and done conversation. Raising kids in the digital age, no joke, it's a lot of work, and it's ongoing work. It's a different conversation when they're in 2nd grade and they're asking if they can download an app or do an in-app purchase than it is in 5th grade when they're starting to beg for a phone, than it is in 8th grade when they have a crush on someone and they're texting them, than it is in high school when they're applying to college and you're starting to think about reputation, right? It's an ongoing conversation, and it's changing all the time. And even as your child is changing and maturing, so are the apps, the games, the kind of digital world, right? It's not staying in one place either. You're like, thanks a lot, Devorah. I was already overwhelmed before I came here. So I'm not trying to scare you, but it is an ongoing conversation. And the good news is mentoring your children in this world is a conversation. And a lot of the things that you need to know are conversations to have with them. So you don't need to go out and research the apps that they want. They should be coming to you with some information about those things. And then that conversation, when they bring those apps to you and say, I want this thing or I want this device, that's the conversation. Well, what does it do? You can actually review apps or games with your child and talk about why they might or might not be a fit at their age. And that conversation is where a lot of the mentoring can happen. As mentors, we want to teach kids to do the right thing, and the problem with putting an app just to follow and track them is then we're going to see them potentially do the wrong thing. And if we're doing it covertly and they don't know we're there, how bad does it have to get before we say, actually, I can see your texts, and that jewelry heist is a bad idea, right? Like, how extreme does the behavior have to get if we're covertly monitoring our kids before we say that we're doing it? So I will say this, I don't give a lot of sort of concrete advice because I truly believe every family is different, every situation is different, but I will say this, if you are going to monitor your kids, I would let them know you're there, because then they can use you as an excuse with peers. They can say, my dad checks my phone, so you can't use that language in this group text to me, or don't ask me for that kind of picture because my parents are looking at my phone. And it actually makes that conversation possible. If you're covertly monitoring your kid, it's hard to then have a conversation about what you're seeing, and so it kind of takes away an opportunity for that conversation. We want to teach kids to do the right thing rather than catch them doing the wrong thing, and we want to expect that they're going to make mistakes. So I know a lot of school districts want to bring me early in the school year because they're hoping that once I come, they're good. Like this is it. We've had the digital citizenship conversation, so clearly, like no mean texts now. Nobody's going to take a bad picture. No kids are going to be fighting about the games they play because the speaker came and talked about digital citizenship, right? So, and especially when I do assemblies for kids, there's this sense like this is the inoculation against any problems. Well, I am sad to tell you, that's not how it works. This is like the beginning of a conversation, and you'll continue to have a conversation, and your kids will make mistakes. We want to teach them to do the right thing, but we make mistakes too. When I do workshops with kids, I have them step into the circle if anyone's ever sent a text to the wrong person or sent a text that caused a conflict. Well, when I have adults in the room, they're all stepping into the circle. Why? Because we've all made these mistakes too. We've shared news that wasn't ours to share by mistake. Oops, I shouldn't have posted that. They hadn't announced that yet. Right, we're all in that boat, and it's not malicious. Kids make mistakes, adults make mistakes. So we want to think about a conversation that helps our kids learn how to repair, learn how to move forward. You've made the joke that offended people. Now they're mad. What are you going to do now? So really looking forward, how are you going to do it differently next time? And also looking at our kids and teaching them to be a little bit forgiving with their friends too, like that it's not about, oh my gosh, that kid posted that thing and now we're never going to sit with him at lunch again, but just like, okay, well, he's embarrassed. He apologized, let's move forward, everyone makes mistakes, as opposed to this kind of like pariah mentality of like, that kid made the mistake. Because the thing is, you don't want to cross to the other side of Whole Foods when you see the mom or dad of a kid who made a digital mistake, because you just don't know what could be coming in your house, really. You don't know, and your kid could have made the same mistake and just not got caught. So you want to really think before you say like, oh, those parents or that kid, right? We've all made mistakes. And so what we need to do is teach our kids, what do you do when you make a mistake? How do you try to make it right? How do you move forward? As mentors, we want to be curious about kids' lives. What is it like being photographed all the time? What is it like that your parents can post your baby pictures and your friends can see? What is it like being able to look up so much information at such a young age? The second you can read, you can Google it, and you're going to get a lot of data that you're just not ready for. What's it like? So we want to be curious about kids' lives and keep having the conversation. We don't want to just negatively kind of label their taste too, like, oh, I hate that game that you play. What do you like about it, right? Really have them show you. If they're really fascinated by something, have them show it to you so that you can understand. You may not like it too. Not everything our kids like we're going to love, but try to understand what it is about that, because that will actually help you, right? I just did a conversation with someone from NPR who was talking to me about reading and how to get kids into reading. Of course, we all want our kids to read. We love reading. And one of the things I said is, don't be such a snob about the Lego Ninjago books. Don't be such a snob about the books that come with the media franchise, because if that's what your kid, and that's what my kid will read, that's what your kid is reading right now, that's okay. Right? First of all, what they're reading when they're 6 or 10 doesn't mean that they won't read something else later. That's one thing. But also, look at some of the things that you loved. Like, look really hard. Like, when I really look back and think about the TV and books that I really loved when I was my kid's age in elementary school, some of it was great, and some of it was kind of, not that great. And, your tastes evolve. So we don't want to just look at our kids' stuff and be like, ick. We want to understand it. If there's something you truly don't want, like I personally don't want my 7-year-old playing war games on the computer, then talk to them about that, right? But I don't want to look at everything he likes and be a snob about it, because, this is what he's into. As mentors, we do want to be conscious of our own habits. If we're reading, we want our kids to know. And if we're doing our reading online, we should make sure that they know that we're reading. When we're on the computer, our kids have no clue what we're doing. We could be playing Words with Friends all the time, or running our company, or paying our taxes, or checking our email. They have no idea. They just know that our head is down. So we need to start to talk to them about what we are doing on there, and also create some good habits in our families, like what showing up to mealtimes, for example, looks like. When we show up to mealtimes and we unplug, then we don't get the teenager who expects to show up to mealtimes plugged. And if they do, we can remind them. But it's a little harder to have a leg to stand on if you've been sitting there at your mealtimes with them for years and your head is down over your cereal bowl in your phone in your lap. It's a harder case to make. So digital footprint, I promised I would talk about that. People are nervous about it. We really want to reframe the conversation about digital footprint and start getting our kids excited about what having a positive digital footprint can look like. So when we think about the Olympics and think about the athletes who came out of the Olympics with amazing reputations, and yes, I know that a few came out with less than amazing reputations, but think about the people who you now admire, that maybe you never heard of before the Olympics, and you admire not because they medaled, what an achievement it was to even be in the Olympics, because of course anyone who's even in the Olympics has already worked a lifetime to be there and has incredible talent and hard work. But then we admire them even more when they reframe the conversation about adoption, or they say, I'll only do sponsorships in my home country because we need the work, right? That's a different kind of way to reframe a conversation. It's someone who's using their reputation, using their public presence for something good. We need to show our children those examples and say, this is a positive way to use a digital footprint. This is a positive use of a reputation. What are you doing that you're proud of? What can you do that you feel good about? And one of the things I shared with the teachers who came earlier today to talk with me about digital citizenship is when we give kids opportunities to create work in the classroom that they can share, whether it's a video or a podcast or other kinds of work that they can share, whether it's within or beyond the school community, we're getting them some practice in being known for their work. And that's the world we live in. We are known for our work. If you don't know me, you might know me by my blog posts, right? Or you might know me by my TEDx or something else that's in my public presence, and that is the way the kids are growing up. And it's not that we need to put pressure, like not every sixth grader or high schooler needs to have a huge public presence where they have all this work out there, but whatever they are sharing, and in whatever size community, maybe it's in their Minecraft community or in their fan fiction community, that's where they're being known. And that's a positive experience. So rather than try to scare them with people who've messed up, because they'll hear that from somewhere, we want to really focus on what is a positive reputation. We can give them a lot of great examples. Okay, another thing that's interesting about growing up in the digital age is that every day is picture day. So when I was a kid and when you guys were kids, many of us, we grew up and we had picture day and we thought about like maybe getting a haircut, and I have some where like my bangs are like this because I got the home do, right? And I'm wearing my turtleneck, and there I am in the picture, looking like this, and that was the wallet size that my parents would carry around with them for years, right? Our kids are living that every day, so what is that like for them? And do they have a sense that they can say no to a peer who wants to take their picture? Because there's devices everywhere with cameras now. It's a huge difference from how we grew up, right? Our parents' cameras came out on special occasions. So one idea I want to suggest for living with the sort of everyday is picture day reality of our kids' lives and our lives is I'm going to suggest to all of you that you start asking your child's permission before taking and especially before sharing your child's photo on social media. So if you have a little toddler, you have to make the best decisions you can. But as your kids get older, as they get more aware of what it is to be shared, what it is to be public, start having that conversation. So my kid already has veto power. I'm sharing a lot less pictures. Some pictures he'll say, well, that's Papa only. So if my husband and I both work and travel and do things, and so sometimes, if Dad's away, I'll send a picture just in the family. So it's just in our little family of 3, right? Or sometimes he'll say, well, you can send that to Papa and Grammy, right? So he's starting to understand the idea of having a little mini public versus Mama's, Facebook friends, which is not so little. It's not crazy huge like some of the kids are, but it's a fair amount of people, and it's some people he doesn't really know, right? So think about that, and think also about the ways your community and social media may overlap with theirs. So if you're sharing some pictures, for example, of birthday parties, think about how there may be families in your social group that are also kind of connected to your kid. And I'm not saying a lot of us are sharing birthday parties on social media, so I'm not like, oh, this is so bad that you've done this, because we've all kind of done it. But think about as your child gets older, as they start to make hard decisions about who to include maybe in a smaller event, it may be time to not share those on social media, maybe only share with the people who came. And if you use like an Evite or something, that gets a little bit easier to do, to share in that circle. Really think about when we share pictures, what we're doing it for. Sometimes I want to show a picture of my kid when he's really clean and well-behaved because I'm like, I'm having a victorious day as a mother, gosh darn it. And my kid is really clean and well-behaved today, and he's wearing a cute outfit, and I want to show that picture to show that I'm a good mom. That's not actually like the greatest reason to share a picture of my kid, right? And I have to really think about, do all these people in my Facebook group really want to see this too? So a lot of times I'll just send those to the grandparents, because that is the endlessly curious audience. They want those pictures of my kid. right? All three grandparents, there's no end really to how much appetite they have for that content. But there's no one else. My husband and I and the grandparents, that's it. Those are the people who want to see like the daily or the weekly picture of the kid. Everyone else probably could do with a little bit less. So we need to be thinking too about what we're sharing and why. With birthday parties, starting to have those conversations. By the time your kid is on social media, him or herself, they should be thinking, am I leaving someone out? Is this a picture I really need to share widely? Right? The flip side, and there's always a flip side, is that we don't want to teach our kids to feel that it's a catastrophe to be left out because they are going to see pictures that they were left out of, inevitably. The most social butterfly kid will still see pictures where other kids were doing something else. It might be because they were at another party, right? But they will still feel like, how could they be having fun without me over there? I was over here having fun with these people. And it's a terrible thing. I mean, that fear of missing out, the FOMO thing, it's real. And some kids experience this in a very intense way. So what we don't want is for our kids to sit around looking at devices, looking at other people's lives, feeling envious, feeling left out. When we see that starting to happen, we need to help them. We need to help them unplug, find another activity, possibly follow different kids. If they're following kids who are consistently leaving them out and it consistently feels bad, maybe they don't need to be connected to those kids on social media. So these are some of the issues with growing up in the digital age. And let's be real. It's no easy thing to see pictures of something we were left out of. It's one thing to hear about it. It's another thing to watch it, right? So that's something to really think about and to really feel empathy for, frankly. Like when we think about what it's like to grow up in the digital age, we need to feel some empathy for these kids. It's not the easiest thing. Mobility is something to think about, whether you're in a small apartment like I am or a big house and you have a basement and upstairs. Think about where the devices go. In Screenwise, I write about curating your home. If you have little kids, making sure that the dress-up clothes and the Legos and the stuffed animals have a fighting chance of getting played with, even if the iPad is also in the house. With older kids, is the musical instrument hanging up on the wall? Are you letting the kids have the kitchen open so they can make some cookies? Are you, in other words, creating an environment where the screens are always going to be super compelling? Are you giving other things kind of a fighting chance? And again, I'm not suggesting you need to have like a huge house and a lot of stuff for that to work. Like our living room is also the piano room, the art room, the mommy and daddy work there sometimes room, right? There's a lot of things happening in that living room, but we still kind of created some areas to do different things in little corners and places where the art supplies are super accessible, because if we put away the art supplies on that high shelf, they don't come down. We want to think about distractions. A lot of our kids sit down to do their work, sit down even to do something they enjoy, and they find it takes longer than they thought it would. How many of you ever have that happen when you sit down at the computer? Anyone ever do something different than you think you're going to do? When I was writing Screenwise, I had to turn off the Wi-Fi for the first hour of every workday and just write, and I couldn't turn it back on. I couldn't turn my computer's connection to the internet back on until I'd written at least 1,000 words. I would still be writing Screenwise had I not done that. Let me go on Twitter just for a minute. Let me go on Facebook just for a minute. Let me research this one thing. So I started writing down all the research questions instead, because I needed the internet to do research, but I didn't need it as much as I thought I did. I didn't need it 24/7. So these are some things we can talk to our kids about. Our kids feel that they have a moral failing when they've become distracted. Our kids think they've done something wrong. They feel bad about getting distracted. We need to let them know, honey, I get distracted too. It's hard to work on a computer. There's a lot going on there. When I typed my college applications on my little Apple IIe many, many years ago, and the screen was this size, there was nothing else to do at that little Apple IIe but type those college applications. I might still be trying to get into college if I had the internet there, because I didn't really want to do it, right? And I had a lot of independence. I didn't have somebody sitting on me like some of you will sit on your kids and make them write their college applications, right? But I didn't have that, so I really might not have gotten to do that. And so think about that for our kids. It's really tough. We need to teach them proactively techniques and co-create solutions with them if they're getting distracted. Another thing you can do is at every school, you can find out from your child's teacher or grade level leader, what is the hourly expectation for homework? What's the range that's typical? Should my kid have 30 minutes to an hour? Should they have 2 hours? What's realistic? What should I expect? If your kid is going into their room and saying their homework takes 4 hours and they are in elementary or middle school, something's wrong. That is not the grade level expectation for any kids in K-8 or even high school, right? It's not supposed to be 4 hours. If your kid is losing sleep to do homework, something is wrong. So really talk to the teacher and go back to your kid with some data. If the teacher says, yeah, 30 minutes to an hour and your kid's taking 2.5, something's going on. So have that conversation. conversation. So what are they doing on there? They're gaming. How many have kids who game? They're gaming. The gaming is much better these days. It's also really immersive. It can be really hard to stop the gaming because it's so cool. It's so immersive. We need to help our kids have boundaries. We need to help them decide, are they ready to play on a public server, or should they only be playing with kids we know and they know? If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, don't be scared, but have a conversation with your kid immediately. Are you, especially if you're talking about an elementary school kid, if you have an elementary school kid playing on public servers, you should know they're doing that, and you should have a sense of, do they know when there's someone who maybe is inappropriate in some way or creepy in some way? What's their plan? If your kid is only playing in the house with siblings or people they know, or playing on a server where maybe some of you may have created servers where they're playing with kids they know that you know, great. Okay, but and I'm not saying that no kid should play on a public server, but if they are playing on a public server with people you don't know and potentially with adults, you want to know that's happening. Conflicts can come up in games. If your kid or any of their friends kind of like to rage quit, like, I'm so mad, I'm quitting, talk to them. What can you do when you're starting to get that angry feeling? Do you need to take a breath? Do you need to pause the game? Do you need to play something else with your friends? When I ask third graders what makes a kid a good kid to play games with, they have a lot of answers, like doesn't cheat, doesn't quit when they're angry. It's good to think about that, right? What kind of person do we want to be in that? We want to be that person in games. Another thing they're doing on there is texting. Even if they don't have a phone, they may have another device that they can text on. Texting is challenging because we don't have tone. So we need to teach kids, like, if you get in a jam with somebody and things are getting funky in the conversation and it's a text, you may need to say, hey, let's talk in person. A very simple conversation where I say to you, where were you at lunch, could sound like an accusation. Where were you at lunch? And then if you were like getting math tutoring at lunch or seeing the counselor at lunch and you don't want to say that because, it's personal, you might be like, well, what's it to you? And then suddenly we're in a fight. I wanted to have lunch with you. We are friends, right? And suddenly we're in a fight because texting has no tone and you can't see. Like if I'm a sensitive friend and I go to my friend and I say, where were you at lunch? And she kind of looks down and doesn't say, I might know, hey, maybe that's private. I'm just going to leave it alone. I know she's not being mean to me. But when we get into a text conversation, it can escalate quickly. So we need to teach our kids about that potential and help them have strategies for de-escalating, because a lot of the drama that can come up in texting is just that we don't see the tone. It's really confusing. Sarcasm is really confusing. You can say something quite mean and then say, JK, just kidding. It's really hard to know, like, were they kidding? That was a pretty mean thing to say. Here's another thing we don't want our kids to do. Now, when Olivia gets back to her phone 1 minute later, after this person has tried to reach her 70 times, she's going to feel a little overwhelmed and stressed out. So we need to teach kids, hey, you don't have to be accessible all the time. And when you text your friend, they might not get back to you. Let's try a little empathy exercise. Close your eyes and picture, what could your friend be doing? It's 6 o'clock at night. What could they be doing? It's 9 o'clock at night. What could they be doing? They could be eating dinner. They could be shooting some hoops in the basketball hoops in the driveway. They could be doing homework. They could be sleeping. It's okay if they don't get back to you right away, and it's okay if you don't get back to them right away. So really helping them with that boundary. It's great for your kid to be able to say to someone, I just got a phone, but I don't text after 9, or anything like that. It really helps them. It decreases their anxiety about being accessible all the time, and it helps their friends know, because we're all making this up. When we were kids, it was so clear that you didn't call at dinner. It was so clear that you didn't call after 10. There were like universal rules about the phone. Now nobody knows, including our employers, right? Including the people who are reaching us. So we need to push back. For those of you who have that opportunity, who are in leadership positions at work, you can tell your team, look, don't email me at this time. I read with my kids, or I'm there for homework hour. That's my family time. Some of the best companies are starting to push back on that and saying, yeah, don't email your team at this hour, right? A lot of, even in countries where they have labor laws that are a little more, worker-friendly than the US, like in Germany, they're saying, people should be paying overtime if they're emailing at all hours. But most of us walk around with this digital tether and feel we must be accessible all the time. So we can push back on that. Another thing they're doing, how many have kids who love YouTube? Okay, YouTube is awesome. You can fix your dryer from YouTube. You can build a robot. You can learn how to play Minecraft better, build rainbow loom bracelets, do all the things, rehab your house. I love YouTube. There's a lot of stuff we don't want our kids to see on YouTube. There's some violent things being recorded around the world. There's pornographic things. There's a lot of things we don't want them to see. So when our kids are little, if they're on YouTube, ideally we're supervising it. we're at least in the room. We have some idea where they are. We do not send, ideally, little kids like to the basement to go play on YouTube for a few hours, because the things they can see are pretty disturbing, and it can happen both by curiosity or by accident. So here, you can't really see this, but I'm looking at pandas, and over on the side, the suggested other videos, women in religious cults. Okay, now I know if I click on women in religious cults, I'm either somewhere gross or I'm now a click away from something gross. I don't want to see it. I don't want my kid to see it. I don't want your kid to see it. So we have to be involved in the conversation about YouTube. And rather than say if our kids see something we don't want them to see, I have to tell you it's kind of like when. And if your kids are 3rd grade and up, it's like it's already happened. It's in the rearview mirror. It's happened. Talk to them about it. What are you going to do if you see a site that isn't for kids? What do you do if you see something that's upsetting? What can you do? Right? Make a plan with them, because it will happen. I'm sorry if that's freaking anybody out. But when I ask a room full of 3rd graders and I say, how many of you have seen a site that wasn't for kids? Every hand usually goes up. So social media. How many have kids who are already on social media? Okay, so about a third, half the room. Okay, so can call out like what social media are they using? Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Musical.ly. Okay, so these are some of the really popular apps right now, Vine, right? So Musical.ly is one that a lot of younger kids are getting on even. So Musical.ly is like a lip-syncing karaoke app. Kids are sharing videos of them singing. Instagram is pictures with cool filters. Snapchat is pictures with cool filters that disappear, or you can post a story that stays up a little longer. What were the other ones I heard? Sorry. Is there another one? Twitter, maybe? Anyway, they're all a little different, but the similar thing is that your kid is creating communication that they're sharing, whether it's a photograph, a video, or Musical.ly, a video of them singing, right? Social sharing is a skill that we're all still mastering. So, like I've got all these people I connect with on Twitter, and I think it's really cool, but there are all kinds of ways for me to fall down and sort of mess up in that space, right? Or not get it right, or not like something fast enough that somebody posted about me even, right? And that might be bad. So we want to help our kids learn the norms of these spaces, and so what we want ideally is for them to talk to us about what's going on in these apps. You want Musical.ly, let's sit down and look at it together. So before you greenlight an app, and especially if you're going to let your under 13, which is for most of these apps, the technical age is supposed to be 13, if you're going to say yes to your 11-year-old on one of these, look at it with them. Even if they're 13 and up, you should do this, but especially if they're going to go in there really young, really talk to them. Have them show you the app. Ideally, have them show you an example of something they think is positive, that someone's representing themselves well, and maybe one that's not so good, like, this is not a great representation of this person. Social media is a process. If you're not on social media yourself, or maybe you're kind of a Facebook user, but not really so up on some of these other ones that our kids are into, again, that's fine. That's okay. You don't have to be. But have them set up their account with you, and ideally have them set you up on an account yourself so that you can be connected in that space. And that's a great conversation. You're going to look with them at the privacy settings, other things. We want kids to identify and observe boundaries. Again, that means not texting friends late at night. It may mean not giving their phone number to certain people, right? All those kinds of things. Who is a good follower for you? Well, if you're 11, I think it's fair to say a good follower is somebody not just that you know personally, which, believe it or not, a lot of kids will follow people they don't know, right? But also maybe that I know, right? Do I really want my 5th grader being followed by people that I don't know? I'm not sure I do, right? So think about those kinds of conversations. What's the criteria? And as kids get older, talk about that criteria. High school kids, sometimes when you start high school, it's a great time to clean up those followers. Like, wow, I met that kid at camp 3 years ago. Do I still really want to be connected on social media, right? So periodically, we want to kind of clean up. And same with as adults. Maybe in the heyday of the beginning of Facebook, we connected with everyone from high school. How are you feeling about that now? Are there people you would like to, disconnect from? That's okay. You can also hide them. We want to teach our kids the skill of repair. If they do make a mistake, if they post something that they regret, they can take it down, but they also need to know how to do some damage control in their relationships. If they email the teacher and the teacher's like, hey, I don't like your tone, they can apologize. They can go to somebody face to face. They need to get some practice repairing these situations. And so ideally, we can share with them some things that we've done to repair a situation. Hey, I sent an email in haste to a colleague, and the tone wasn't great, and now we're kind of a little tense with each other, and this is how I'm working it out. Don't be afraid to bring some of those stories home. It doesn't make you look bad. It makes you look like a human being that your kid can learn from. We want to find productive ways to deal with failure. So what do we do when the kid is on purpose on an inappropriate site or using a device when we've told them you can't use it after 10, and then we go in their room and they've gone down to the kitchen and they took the device up to their room and it's 2 in the morning and they're gaming, right? What do we do when that happens? Well, we can certainly think about taking the device away for a set period of time, but we should also think about what is going to work for you. Like, if you're consistently having trouble disconnecting from the game and doing homework during the week, let's co-create a solution. I've had kids suggest to their parents, hey, maybe I can't game during the week. It doesn't really work for me right now. So come up as much as possible, collaborate with kids on solutions going forward. There are going to be times where we just need to be authoritarian, and just that's not working for us, we're doing something different. But as much as possible, co-create solutions with kids, see if they have ideas for how it could be better. They probably don't like feeling out of balance either, right? Or they don't like some of the things that have been happening in those spaces. So work with them and see what you can come up with. Sometimes family life in the digital age looks like this. I love how the dad is on his phone, but the kid is reading a book here. We just want to pay attention to these issues and notice when we're alone together, which is a phrase I'm borrowing from the media scholar Sherry Turkle. When we're alone together too much, it doesn't feel good in family life. Now, sometimes like this can be fine for a family. We all need some of our own space, and if you've ever done that kind of traveling where you have 5 of you in a hotel room, this could be great. You just, I need my space. Okay, let me zoom into this screen for a little while, or this book for a while. But we don't want all our family life to look like this. And so we want to think about, look around during the week and say, are we all in our own little screen worlds? Are there ways we could bring that together? Could we even do some joint things? Could we be playing Wii or watching a movie together? Could we unplug together and go outside? What are some things we can do that are not just each one on their own screen? Because we had to negotiate, the screen time. We had to fight with our siblings about what to watch, and now our kids can all take a screen and go watch their own things, right? And some of that negotiation skill is actually kind of useful. So I want to summarize here, and then I'd be happy to take a couple questions. We want to mentor more than we monitor. You can put an app on their phone to know where they are and what they're doing, but please sometime take it off. Someone years ago at a talk told me they're still geo-tracking their college kid to see if she's going to class. So if you are, monitoring your kid, have a plan for backing off from that, right? Like, what's the plan? Sometime, hopefully, before college. Boundaries are clarity. So your boundaries, their boundaries. If you're unplugged at meals, they can be unplugged at meals. If you want them to, not be on at a certain time, make that really clear to them and give them some language that's friendly but assertive to tell their friends that. Creativity versus consumption. Think about what we're doing on there, right? Screen time isn't all the same. Making a book is different, I would say, than just watching content. Now, I wouldn't let my kid stay up all night and write a symphony either because he needs to get his sleep, but I might feel a little bit more flexible about the amount of time he spends if he's creating something and engaged in that or putting something back into a community versus just receiving content, watching show after show, which Netflix makes it real easy for our kids to do, right? It's just the next one, the next one, the next one. And even for us, it's a challenge, right? I'm watching Stranger Things right now, and it's like, oh, the next one. Let me watch the next one. We want to teach our kids to work it out face-to-face. If they're having an issue that comes up in their digital life, in their gaming life, in their texting life, they need to know, hey, sometimes you can't solve it there. Work it out face-to-face. Talk to your friends in person. And then finally, for all of us, it's good to remember, our devices are great. Our email is so important, so important. Wait, let me check that. Oh, but we need to be here now. I'm here now with you. You're here with me. When you go home, you're with your family, you're with your children. You want to remember to be present and just model that for kids and remember everyone to take some time to put the device away. For me, sometimes I have to put it in a drawer because it's pretty compelling for me. I'm if it's out there on the table, if I'm looking at it and I see it buzzing, I'm not really able to fully attend to what's here. So I find I have to really put it away and even turn it off to fully be present. So be here now. Thank you so much. This is me.